Well, good evening, everyone. I'm glad that you all made time to come tonight and hear from one of our community members and a wonderful thing that's going on. Um, I would like to let you know that we have a wonderful website. This is All Together Williamsburg. So we'd love for you to join us and visit our website. We've got some wonderful information about things that are going on in our community. We have podcasts and videos and book lists and talks a little bit about what our organization does and how you can become a part of it. We have a membership drive coming up soon. Well, actually, any day is a membership time for us, but it's $35 to join. The membership goes toward scholarships that we give out to for students in our schools that are people that have been recognized in their community as bridge builders. And they're chosen by the members, teachers and guidance counselors. Each school does it a little differently, but the students are chosen for this award from their community schools. One of the perks that we added this year was if you are a paid member, we have a what we're calling a social hour, a virtual meetup that we have every month. This month, it's going to be November 21st at 3:00. Please come. We've actually had some wonderful conversations, and it's been a good way to get to know each other. You can come for 10 minutes or you can come for an hour. It's just a nice way to get to know other people in the group. We also have on our website, you'll notice we have some committees. We would love for you to be a part of continuing the work that we do. So take a look at our page on our website of the committees that we have. We'd love for you to join us and become more engaged with that. This year was our 4th year of we have a Black Lives Matter lemonade stand on Duke Gloucester Street during the farmers market. We finished up this year's season, and we had some wonderful conversations with our community. We really would love for you all to come and be a part of that. So next, we will start back again in April of next year. We're also looking for someone who is adventurous and would like to help us in the organization of that booth every Saturday. So if you're interested, have a desire to become part of that committee, we'd love to hear from you. We don't require having any background, but it's helpful. But we would love for you to come and sit with us and engage with the community. So there's a lot of us that would support you if you were there. So without any other announcements, that's what I have right now. Jody, do you want to go ahead and say again what your role is and what you're going to be doing during this?
I'm primarily here as the technical host, so I will be keeping an eye on the chat. If there are questions that come up in the course of the presentation tonight, please feel free to put them in the chat. And then at the appropriate time, I'll be happy to field those questions to Jessica, our guest speaker. And then, as I said, I'll keep an eye, make sure that folks are muted. If you have any background noise going on, I'll take care of hitting your mute button for you. Everyone is allowed to unmute themselves. So if at a certain point you do need to speak, you have that ability to unmute yourself. I think that's everything.
Okay. Well, let me introduce you to our guest this evening is Jessica Sapalio. She's in here somewhere. I don't know how it looks on your screen, but on my screen, I only have a line of folks. So Jessica is an advocate for racial justice and criminal legal system reform. She is a founding member of the WJCC Coalition for Community Justice and one of the social justice co-chairs at the Williamsburg Unitarian Universalist. She also runs the Williamsburg Court Watch program and the Journey to Asylum program. Prior to moving to Williamsburg, she lived in Australia and Northern Virginia and worked as vice president at GMMB, a communications and marketing firm for social causes and liberal candidates, and for the American Red Cross Measles Initiative vaccine campaign in Africa and Asia. In her spare time, and I don't know how she has any spare time, she has 4 children too. So, and is a volunteer archaeologist on slavery-related historical sites. Jessica Sapalio, thank you for coming this evening, and you have the floor.
All right, thanks so much, Beth, and thanks everyone for joining us and to All Together for the invitation to be here. I love this organization and I'm really honored to be a speaker tonight. As you know, I'm going to be talking about criminal legal system reform, both in WJCC here locally, some initiatives that are going on, as well as statewide, and hoping to give you a little bit more information about the problem. I know we all know that there is a significant problem both here and around the country, and then also sharing some exciting things that are going on that I'm hoping many of you will be interested in getting involved in. There are many things to be done, and we need people at every level doing things. So if you hear about something, flag it, get in touch with me afterward, because I would love to have everybody be a part of this. And I'll say from the beginning, I'm definitely not an expert on everything criminal justice, so I will try to answer everybody's questions, but also as just to tell you that if you know nothing about it now but are interested, you can make a difference, because it's there's a lot of people out there willing to teach you, and they've really helped me kind of get some understanding. I have a ways to go, but I wanted to say that everyone really can make a difference from the beginning. So I'm going to go ahead and actually share. I have a presentation to go along with us tonight. Okay. Beth, can you see, everyone see it okay? All right.
Yes, and Jessica, before you continue, I'll just remind people that you can change your view of this. So if you're seeing people's faces blocking any of the slides, you can go over to the little view button in Zoom and select side-by-side speaker or side-by-side gallery, and that will prevent anybody's video screens from covering over the PowerPoint slides.
All right. Thanks, Jody. Okay, so criminal legal system reform, and I'm actually going to start with this cover slide because this is an important, just the title alone is an important way to start framing our thinking about criminal legal system reform. We often hear it referred to as the criminal justice system, but as many of you know, and I'll be talking about further, there is a real lack of justice or equitable justice in the criminal legal system. So we're trying to kind of move away from calling it the criminal justice system and more the criminal legal system to kind of help drive that point home and frame the conversation as we go forward. So let's see here. Okay, there we go. So just to give it some context, as everybody knows, this summer with the tragedies of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and others, we saw lots of protests around the country. These are photos from here locally in Williamsburg and James City County of the protests that we saw, many of which I know many of you were at these, and many of which were organized by Williamsburg Action. We've got, the top picture shows here at the courthouse. And this is really, I think this summer was one example of people really, this issue coming to the forefront. But of course, this has been something that has been going on for a very long time, and reform has been so desperately needed. I talk a lot about how really the living legacy of slavery in our country today is the criminal legal system and mass incarceration, which I think we all living in such a historic place where slavery in America really began here at Jamestown. I think it's an important for us to think about the fact that this is still going on. Mass incarceration is one very serious way that we are still oppressing African Americans in our country. And that's why I feel so passionate about this issue and about finding some ways that we can tackle it both locally, statewide, and nationally. The first couple slides I'm going to talk about are just to give some context on the various levels of issues and just throw a couple stats out. This is starting here locally and starting with policing. We have you'll hear, oh, our police forces, we haven't had any major tragedies, we've got a great police force. And in many ways that's true, but there is still a real problem. Black people make up about 13% of our local population, and yet over the last several years, they make up 41% to 44% of all arrests. So you can see there's a huge disparity in the number here. And there's several reasons for this. It's everything from where the policing is happening. There's several neighborhoods that are definitely over-policed, but this stat is just, it's blaring. It's showing us that there is a huge problem here in our town with our policing. Then moving on to look at our incarceration rates here in Virginia. And Virginia is one of the worst states in terms of our disparities in incarceration. Black people make up approximately 18% of our state population, but we're 58% of the jail and prison population. And you can see here on this graph, whites, Hispanics, Native Americans are, all somewhat similar. Of course, whites are incarcerated at the lowest rates, but the rate of incarceration for Black people is literally off the charts. Another issue in our system is that we have a system that is built on the premise that you are innocent until proven guilty, but that is not what's going on. So right now, more than 40% of the people being held in our jails and prisons in Virginia have not yet been found guilty of a crime. So they're there in prison, languishing in our jails because they can't afford bail. And just even 1 or 2 days spent in jail can result in people losing their jobs, their homes. Often social services gets involved. They can end up losing their kids. So this is a really serious issue in a country where we pride ourselves on having a system that is focused on and built on the fact that you are innocent until found guilty. And again, this graph just shows this. The top line is showing the number of convicted people who are in our jails, and the bottom line is showing pre-trial. So you can see, they're pretty similar, which again, is a real problem. And especially when you have most of the people that are being arrested being African Americans, that's who we're keeping in these jails. So what are we doing about it? I'm going to start by talking about the Williamsburg James City Coalition for Community Justice. This group was formed this summer. As a result, it came out of the protests and actually Williamsburg Action Group, people found each other on the website and said, okay, we want to do something about injustices in our local justice system. So we've come together. We're a variety of different organizations. We have All Together is represented. We've got the WU, NAACP, the Village. There are many groups, as well as just concerned individuals who want to make a difference. And we came together and we looked at the system and where we wanted to start. And we said, okay, our priority is to address police brutality and other police issues. And we think that we can best do that through creating a civilian oversight board. And I'll talk about that in more detail in a second. And the second thing that we wanted to do was get a better idea of what some of the issues in our community actually are with the police. So collecting those stories so that we can refer back and add that to the data. We've got some qualitative data, or some quantitative data, sorry, and we want to add the qualitative stories to that. But going back to the Civilian Oversight Board, and to give you more of an idea of what this is, because it's sort of a buzz term. Sometimes they're called civilian review boards or citizen review boards, but they are, I'll go back, they're more independent entities that are set up in communities to handle complaints about the police. So if somebody has a situation that they did not feel was handled well, no matter how small it is, right now, if you had a situation like that, you could call the police and complain to them about their own officers. And how do you think that's going to go? And that's if you're even brave enough to call the police and make a complaint. So the idea with a civilian oversight board is that it's an independent entity that would handle these complaints. It would be comprised of people in the community. It would be representative of the community, and it would not have any police officers or former police officers on the board. This board would receive significant training in police policy and practices so that they did have an understanding, and they would have outside advisors with criminal justice background that they could turn to. And ideally, this board would have subpoena power and investigative power, so they could hire their own private investigators to look into issues. And then they would make disciplinary recommendations to the police chiefs. And then the police chiefs could make the ultimate decision on what to do. But our ideal would be that if the police chief's opinion differs, that we would publicize that so that the public would know. So that's an overview of what that board would look like. And there are several benefits to the community of having this board. It really benefits the whole community. Number one, it gives civilians a voice. So the police work for us. We are taxpayers, and we pay our tax dollars, pay for the police departments. So we really need to have a voice in how they're run, and who, and they need to be accountable to us as civilians. These boards improve transparency and accountability. I don't think that you'll find, I definitely know our local police departments, claim that they really want to be accountable to the community, and they want to be as transparent as possible. And this is a really great way for them to do that. It improves equity. A lot of, again, people say, well, we don't have a lot of problems with the police. Well, we just don't always hear that because it's hard for people to complain about their oppressors. So by having this independent entity where complaints can be filed, that enables those to be addressed and for us to achieve greater equity. And it also benefits the police because we're creating safer policing. When you build community trust for your police departments, because they can trust that the police are being held accountable, then people trust the police more and they're more willing to work with them or to call them in bad situations for help. So it really does end up creating a safer community for everybody involved. Okay, so we are, so right now the status of this, we've put together a proposal. We have met with both the Williamsburg and James City County Police Chiefs. And right now we are sort of shopping this around to city council members and the Board of Supervisors, because they're ultimately going to be the ones to make the decision to institute an oversight board. And of course the police, while they want to play nice, they don't necessarily want another group overseeing them. So there's some resistance there that we're trying to work through, and we want it to be a collaborative process. And so I think what it's going to really take is some real community pressure from all of our groups to say that this is an important step and that we want to see it happen. So I will be coming back to all of you and your groups and probably asking through us to do email campaigns and asking people to write in support of this so that they understand that the community really does want this. In Williamsburg City, you'll hear that they're forming what they're calling an advisory board, and the word advisory, tells me they're checking a box. The board would not have any actual powers, and for that matter, is not really set up to handle complaints. So a lot of police departments are sort of rushing to say, oh, we have advisory boards as sort of a preemptive step. So that's something that we're trying to work with the city to say, you know, that's not really addressing the problem. That's not really going to create accountability in the way that we think we need to build community trust. So that is where we're at with that. The next project I wanted to tell you about, and hope, and I should say with all of these, and definitely with the coalition, anyone is more than welcome to join us. So our Court Watch program is sort of the next level of how we're addressing justice issues in our community. The Court Watch program has volunteers in the courtrooms, and this is pre-COVID. We've sort of hit pause with COVID, but once it's safe again, we'll be back in there. But before COVID, we had volunteers in our WJCC courthouse every day of the week, listening to all of the first appearances that people had in the courts and listening to the bail hearings. So if, let's say, so if a person is arrested, often they go to the magistrate within the first 24 hours and usually within the first 4 hours. And then after that, they're the next day, as long as it's not a weekend, they go before a judge. And the judge is usually reviewing their case, determining if they are eligible for court-appointed counsel. And then also they can request a bail hearing to have their bail situation reevaluated. So we are in those courts to gather data because, interestingly, our state systems and our local systems are not set up to gather accurate data on what is happening in our court system. So it's, you know, it blew my mind when I first got started with this, but you can't just go to a system and look up, okay, what are people's bail amounts? You know, how much bail are they being charged? How many felonies are coming through? How many people are being given court-appointed attorneys? There is no system across the board to track that data, which is a real problem, because at least a problem for advocates, because we have a hard time quantifying the issue and the problem. We know it's out there, we know the problems exist, but we don't have the data to speak to this. So there are, I believe there are 4 other court watches in Virginia that are gathering this data. We all feed the data into a statewide system that can be, so that it can be used statewide, but we're also looking to see what the problems are here locally. So you can see in this chart, this is about, we were active for about 6 months before COVID shut us down. But just in the first 6 months, we started to have some really significant data come in. As we were looking at bond and bail, this chart shows there's a couple things a judge can do. They can hold you without bail and say, no matter what, that you cannot get out until your trial. Either we think you're a risk to the community or we think you're a flight risk. Or they can release you on your own recognizance. That means you're just free to go. They can issue a secured bond, which says, this is what we typically think of as cash bail. So they can say, okay, for $1,000, you can, you pay $1,000, or you have a bail bondsman pay the $1,000 for you, and then you're released until your trial date. The problem with that is bail bondsmen take a 10% fee that people don't get back, even if they're found innocent of the crime that they were accused of. So that is money gone. And then there's unsecured bond, which works where a judge will say, you are released, but if you don't appear, you will owe us $1,000. So as you can see here, what we want is definitely the unsecured or released on your own recognizance, because that keeps people out of our jails pre-trial and allows them to move on with their jobs and their lives. And really, people do return in large numbers. They return for their trials. So what was interesting that you could see here, these colors, the green is African American, the gray is white. You can see that by far African Americans were held at a much higher rate, held without bail. They had no option to get out pre-trial than whites. And with unsecured bonds, which is the one that we want, or the released on your own recognizance, whites were given that at much higher rates than Black people were. So there, just in our initial data gathering, we saw that there's a significant problem in our court system. And we met with the county Commonwealth attorney, Nate Green, and he admitted that he said, we don't track our own data. We don't know, we don't have this information, and was really eager to work with us and have us continue to share the data with him so that he can address this with his Commonwealth attorneys. So that is our Court Watch program. And then I just want to briefly mention 2 statewide coalitions that are going on. The first is the Virginia Pretrial Justice Coalition. And this is state organizations from around the whole state working on, it came together because people were saying we need to get rid of cash bail. It's, for all of the reasons I just discussed, cash bail is a real problem in our state. But then some other organizations felt like if we get rid of cash bail, what we're going to see is judges are just going to hold everyone and not release anyone. They'll just hold them without bail, and we'll end up with a huge pretrial or an even bigger pretrial population in our jails. Virginia's kind of not really ready to get rid of cash bail. We need to do a lot of education on why it is safe to release people. So this coalition is working on 3 different things. One, we're trying to get the state to start collecting this data so that we don't actually have to have court watch programs. So we are putting forth legislation to say, collect the data. The biggest thing, of course, is the budget to do that. But we're going to be pushing forward again in this General Assembly coming up in January. The next thing that we want is counsel at first appearance. So as you know, if people qualify in a criminal trial, they are entitled to representation if they meet certain financial qualifications. But really, people's first appearance, as I mentioned before, is before a magistrate in that first 4 hours. And usually, and there is no counsel offered. So people have to go to that magistrate by themselves, and that's often where their first bail is set. So it really, and all of the studies show that having counsel drastically, and having counsel from the beginning of your trial drastically affects the outcome. Everything from plea bargaining to actually being found guilty, of course. So that's very important. So we're working on pushing for counsel at first appearance, for that to be provided at the magistrate level. And then we're also going to be working on, this is a more technical one, but it's eliminating presumptions against bail. In our Virginia state code, there are a number of things that if you're accused of certain crimes, that automatically means that you cannot be let out on bail. Judges do have some discretion around that, but they usually don't take it. They just say you're not eligible for bail because you were charged with one of these crimes. And we don't actually need that, because there are many other tools that judges have to use to determine if you are a flight risk or if you're a safety risk to the community. So we don't need these presumptions, because that doesn't let each individual be considered, and ends up with a pretty biased system. So those are kind of the 3 pieces of legislation that we're working on a statewide level. And again, I would love people's backing, reaching out to your legislators in support of those, and I'll get information out for anybody that's interested in that. And then lastly, I'll just quickly mention we have another coalition statewide, that's the COVID-19 Justice Coalition. And as you've probably heard on the news, COVID is just running rampant through our prisons and jails. It's a major issue. There's not really a way to isolate people. So when they do try to isolate people, they're basically putting people in solitary confinement for weeks on end. It's inhumane, and it's critical that we try to reduce our prison and jail populations as we safely can. There are a lot of people that are really close to finishing their sentences, and things that could safely be let out to try to reduce this population. So that's what that coalition is working on as well. Okay, so sorry, I know I've thrown a lot of information out there. Just a couple more things about how you can get involved and help. The Coalition for Community Justice, we meet on Zoom every other Thursday at 7 p.m. and anyone that's interested in this is welcome. You don't have to know a lot about it. We'll get you up to speed. We would love to have anybody be a part of that. Submit your stories or share the word. If you have stories about negative interactions with our police, I can tell you how to do that. We have a whole online form where you can do that. And I also, if you have organizations that you can get that out to so that we can spread the word that we're collecting these stories, that would be great. Writing letters to City Council and Board of Supervisors, like I mentioned about that Civilian Oversight Board. I'm going to be hitting everybody up to help with that in the coming weeks. Volunteer for Court Watch when we're back, when COVID hopefully is behind us in the next few months. We'll be starting Court Watch back up when it's safe to be back in the courtrooms. And this is a fabulous program. I can train people in an hour, and then I go with you to the courtroom because I know it's intimidating the first time you go. And then really we just ask our volunteers for a 2 to 3 hour commitment per month. It's really easy and it's a great way to kind of get your feet wet, start to learn about our criminal legal system and to make a real contribution. And then lastly, we'll also put out information as a follow-up on those pieces of legislation that I mentioned, and contacting your state representatives about those would be great. So, and I've also put my email here, an easy one to remember, socialjustice@wuu.org. It's an easy way to get in touch with me. But I know I've thrown a lot, so I'm happy to take questions and conversation.
Thanks, Jess. We've gotten a few questions coming in through the chat. Let's see. And so I'll start with the one that applies to your most recent slide. Is there an interest list if people want to know when volunteers are needed, for example, when the Court Watch program starts back up again, or if there's an initiative that people should be contacting their legislators about? How should they find out about those opportunities when they come up?
Yes, if people just want to shoot me a quick email, just, with your name and email and that you want to be, kept in the loop, I will make sure that you are.
Okay. And someone has actually asked if you could put that slide back up with your email address on how to get involved.
Sure, will do.
And will you be making this available to us as a PDF, your slides?
Sure, yes, I can definitely do that.
Cool. And then also, how do people get the Zoom information for the Coalition for Community Justice calls? Is that also by emailing you?
Yep, that's probably the easiest way.
Okay, great, thanks. So another question, how is it possible in this day and age when we are so awash in data that courts are not tracking data on bail outcomes?
Yeah, it's a good question. That's what we ask ourselves every day, but they literally do not have the information. Even when I call, it's the jails often don't even have information. They don't know how much people are there for. The magistrates have some of that, the magistrates have some of that information, but our systems are really all over the place and it's purposeful. Obviously, like you're saying, in this day and age, we've got the ability to do this. But if you can throw your hands up and say, I don't know, then it's a lot harder for me to point my finger and say, I see X, Y, and Z disparity. So we know that it's all part of that system of mass incarceration and oppression. They don't want to make these answers easy.
That reminds me of what was coming out of Florida before the election with the effort to pay people's bail so that they would be able to vote in the election. And some people were running into the problem that they couldn't actually find out how much they owed. And so that actually leads to the question about, to the extent that you know this, how do Virginia's practices compare to what's happening in other states?
Yeah. It's not good. We are one of the worst in the state. Just the stat that I gave about the number of African Americans that are incarcerated, it's one of the worst. We have one of the worst rates of incarceration. I'm actually going to see if I can find another slide to show you, because Virginia is worse than like the top 10 NATO countries in terms of our rates of incarceration, just our state, let alone our country. So it is really, it's not good. I was gonna see if I could pull that up real quick while we're talking, because I do have another slide about that, but I probably, anyway, I can take the next question while I look for it.
Okay, sure. To your knowledge, are any of the organizations that you talked about focusing on things like restoration of rights for, especially related to voting rights and things like that?
We are not, none of my organizations are at this point, but I know there are, trying to think if anyone else on the call can think, because there is an organization, I want to say that it was a William and Mary student-run organization, actually, that was doing a lot of outreach on restoration. Does anyone know about that? Anyone else on the call?
If someone knows, they can
It was a
unmute.
law
It
school.
might have been one of the legal clinics.
Yeah, it was a law school group, yeah.
Yeah.
Was it? Okay. Yeah.
Thank you. Let's see. Do you know, has the General Assembly shown any interest in establishing police oversight boards through legislation?
Yes, thank you. I'm so glad that question came up, because that in this special session that just happened, we were very pleased. There was both a Senate bill and a House bill submitted, and they passed, and the governor signed it. So basically what this allows, it does, unfortunately, one of the Senate bill actually was a mandate. They did not pass the mandate, but they did enable localities to give subpoena power and disciplinary power to these boards, which is really important, because there were a couple locations such as Fairfax County that had oversight boards, and there was one in Charlottesville also, but they didn't have real teeth because they didn't have these powers. But the General Assembly did pass that, so they have real power. So now we just have to convince our localities that they need to have the boards in general.
Let's see, Ann Kelly, do you have a hand up? If you'd like to unmute yourself.
Have you been in contact with the National Center for State Courts at all? I don't know what kind of data they may have, but it might be a possible resource.
Yes, thank you. I do. Actually, we have someone that works there at WU. So I have talked to them somewhat, and they have some data, but again, and that's the thing, there is data. It's just, it's very fragmented, and there's no system to integrate any of it. So it's like one person over here will have this little piece of data, and then one person will have this piece, and trying to put them all together is a real challenge.
To that point, Diane Langhorst has a comment in the chat about how journalists have been trying to get this kind of data for a long time. So can you reach out to the Daily Press and the State Freedom of Information Group?
Yes, we definitely, we know about all of their efforts, and that also has sort of fed into some of this legislation, the work that they had done over the last, well, it's been a long time of them doing this work.
And can you speak to the conversations that you've had with any of our local politicians on this issue? What's their response been?
Yes, so I've spoken with, like I mentioned, I've spoken with both police chiefs. We thought when we started, we thought that the Williamsburg police would be kind of the lower hanging fruit, and we would start there. And actually, surprisingly, the James City County Police Chief seemed more amenable to the idea. So, he was very much, his argument, he said, my main argument against this is that I would be harsher with my own staff than a board would be. And I was like, I think we could fix that. So, I think, I think they will drag their feet as much as they can. And that's why they really need to hear from the community that this is something that we want. I have also had a conversation with one of the city council members, Caleb Rogers. And again, they're very focused on this advisory board that they are starting in Williamsburg. And they want to see that go into place. And again, I don't have a problem with that, but I think they can advise them on lots of things, but that's different from an actual oversight board that's going to create real accountability. So, you know, I think Caleb understands our goals and is supportive of them, but, you know, thinks that we can achieve the same thing. You know, there's often the response of Williamsburg, such a small town. We have a good police department. We don't need that. We don't need the big tragedies like a George Floyd to tell us that we need this. We know we have disparities in policing, and we don't want a George Floyd. You know, this is a preventative measure as well as addressing the current issues. So, you know, there are real issues, and we need serious action, not just an advisory council.
Could you go over again what legislation was passed in the special session that we just came out of and what you're working on for the upcoming regular session?
Sure. So the one that I just talked about was empowering civilian oversight boards and giving them the ability to have subpoena power in their investigations so that they can pull the records from the police departments. And it also gives them disciplinary powers. It's sort of up to, we actually weren't asking for disciplinary power. We were trying to use that as a way to make it slightly more palatable for our police chiefs, where we were going to make disciplinary recommendations with this board and then allow them the final decisions. And we would just publicize if they chose to do differently from our recommendation. But the law does enable these boards to have disciplinary power once they're established. So that's the legislation that we're excited about that just passed. There's a number of other ones, bans on chokeholds, and several other important legislation that passed in the special assembly. And then the ones that we're working on moving forward in January are going to be a data collection bill to have systems to really collect robust data. The second one is eliminating the presumptions against bail, those charges that automatically say they can hold you without bail. And then the other one, and the third one is representation at first appearance, so that people that qualify can have a lawyer the first time they appear in the legal system.
Thank you. Let's see, and can you speak to the issue of qualified immunity and how people are responding to that among any of the groups that you're talking with?
You know what, I'm actually going to defer on that because I'm just not an expert on it. Sorry, I don't want to talk about something that I don't know a whole lot about.
That's good, fair enough. I think I have covered everything that has come in the chat. And if anybody's waving a hand, I can't see it because I only see a couple of thumbnail screens on my video. So someone else can alert me if there's someone who has a hand raised physically.
Looks like Ann does.
I'm just curious, how does York County fit into all of this? I realize that or let's put it this way, the Bruton area of York, what they call the Bruton district of York County.
Yes. So York County, again, what I think, what we've tried to do is do the low hanging fruits first. York County is going to be a very tough nut to crack. Their Commonwealth attorney is not interested in playing nice on these issues. Their police department, they were very quick when they saw this legislation on oversight boards go before the General Assembly. They very quickly instituted an advisory board to try to preempt action there. But we know there's a real problem and a real need for our work there. Right before COVID happened, we had just started to expand our court watch program to the York County courts, York and Poquoson courts. But we had done it for 1 week and then we got shut down. So, and we know for an oversight board that too would be very valuable there. So I think our goal was to try to get it set up, Williamsburg, James City County first, and then tackle York County. Beth.
Do you have any, or have you collected any data on youth and their numbers and how we are in our community with that?
Yes, no is the answer. In our courts, the challenge is the juvenile courts are often closed. So our court watchers cannot easily go into the juvenile court system and observe that. You know, I know some data exists in terms of policing, but that is something also that we do want to dig into. And one of the things, you know, I mentioned the civilian oversight will not just handle complaints, but will also dig into data and policies as well, and try to see, you know, try to get a better sense and hopefully have more access to information that the police departments have, so that we can look into those issues, because that is a big concern in several of our partner organizations like the Village. And, you know, there is a lot of concern regarding the school to prison pipeline.
We've had a question come in related to budgets, and given that budgets are so much tighter because of COVID, how do you expect that to affect progress?
Yes, it is a big challenge, and we're actually in the research phase right now at looking at funding models for oversight boards. Often what communities do is they will request 1% to 2% of the police budgets to fund these boards. And there's all different models. There's ones that actually have a paid executive director. I'm not sure that that's needed. Hopefully our complaint levels would be low. But we're kind of looking at best practices for those models as well as for budgeting. We are looking, you know, one of the things that we definitely feel is important is that in order to get a diverse membership of the board, we would like to offer a stipend. People can refuse the stipend, you know, it's a voluntary position, but so that we can have people who, you know, may not have the resources and time to take off to spend on a board like this, we would like board members to be offered a stipend to participate. But of course, there will be, you know, the larger budgetary issues come into play when you're hiring private investigators. So that's where the real big budgetary amounts come from. So it will be a challenge, and that's kind of the research phase we're at right now.
I'll ask a question of my own. I attended I think it was a panel that the law school did, perhaps it was over the summer or early fall. And one of the speakers was talking about a number of reforms that had been instituted under the Obama administration related to community and policing agreements that seemed to be very promising and seemed to be working, took a lot of time. And then, of course, after the Obama administration ended, things kind of fell apart. I don't know, are you familiar with any of that? And can you speak to any of that?
Yeah, a little bit. And we actually do have, you know, there was a covenant signed here locally between several organizations and several representatives from the African-American community and the police.
No, I'm still on it, but it's
And
questions.
sorry, and you know, so there is a big push for, you know, community policing and all of that, you know, those kind of terms. But I think it's a slippery slope, because while I think building those relationships is critical and very important to building that trust and safe communities on every front, safe for our police and safe for our civilians. But I think that, you know, without serious accountability, you know, it's hard to have those truly meaningful relationships. You know, if there's no way for people to actually have their complaints truly evaluated and investigated independently from the police, you know, then it's hard to, you know, it's easy to come together and sign a paper and say we're all going to get along, but, you know, I think we know where that could go.
Thank you. What type of coalition building has there been with the African-American community on these topics that you're talking about?
Yeah, so we, so especially with the WJCC coalition and working on this civilian oversight board, we do have a very a diverse group, and a much more diverse group than a lot of the initiatives and social justice work that I've been involved in. I mentioned we have representatives from the village, the NAACP, and a lot of just individuals as well. So, and we've been reaching out to the Black churches. That's an effort that we're continuing to do to try to get even more representation, reaching out to the community. We have, I know Beth is helping us. We have cards about the program and about the coalition that we're trying to get into various communities. I know Beth is going to take them to Grove and Highland Park and try to distribute them as widely as we can. We've asked, churches to put them in their bulletin, things like that. So we are, we're trying as much as we can, but I've actually been quite pleased that we, I think, Jess O'Brien and Beth often come to our meetings, and, we do have diverse representation. The chair of the coalition is African-American, so.
Yes, are any of the legal clinics at William and Mary participating with you?
They aren't on these projects, actually. I've been in touch with some William and Mary law professors. Adam Gershowitz is the law school's top criminal justice professor, and he is actually part of the WJCC coalition as a private citizen, not representing the law school. But I have been in touch with trying to think of their exact name, but it's the Minority Law Student Association, and then also a Minority Grad Student Association. And they're very interested in all of this work and in helping us get the word out, especially among the student bodies.
Isn't that the Black Law Students?
Black Law, yes, there's a Black Law Student Association, and then there's a Minority Grad Student Association. Yes. We really do. We want this coalition to really represent the community at every level. So we're trying to reach anyone we can, and we're, like I said, we are really open to suggestions and any groups or individuals that want to be a part of us. And we've also said, we welcome law enforcement to be a part of us as well. When we actually set up the board, we don't want law enforcement to sit on that, but our coalition would welcome law enforcement if they share our goals.
How about teachers or someone from the school district?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm trying to think if any of our members are teachers.
Is Philip involved?
Yeah, I was going to say Philip, because we do have representatives from the village, which is focused on education, but they're not necessarily all teachers. So Philip has come to some of our meetings. Yeah, Philip Kennedy.
Are there any special fundraising needs or particular fundraising needs right now?
Not at this time. We were basically, our costs were just, flyers and postcards for getting the word out, and and similarly for Court Watch, we're able to run it pretty inexpensively, and our WU social justice budget has been, supportive of these efforts. So.
Beth, you had your hand up. Yeah.
So we're looking at the justice part of it. Are you also considering how policing is happening? Are the discussions occurring on our methods? And I think the thing was surprising to me as a member of the NAACP, and being when back many times when Ferguson happened, we had many discussions with the two different police departments. And I think the thing that was most surprising is some of the information that we got about not only the statistics, but some of the things that they routinely did that, were a little surprising. And that, many of the personnel come right from the military, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but they are people being prepared to then go into the streets and do some of these things that if you're coming with a certain mindset. So is that?
Yes, definitely. And that has been part of the conversation that we've had with the police chiefs. It's interesting because we just actually the call that Elaine Loria sponsored last week, Chief Dunn from Williamsburg was on that and spoke about the militarization of the police. And the way he addressed it was to say, oh, do you think our uniforms are too military looking? They don't look like military uniforms. They're really nice, these white, nice police uniforms. I'm just like, oh man, you're just not getting it, man. So just missing the mark completely here about what we're talking about.
And he said, don't we need to look professional? We need to look professional.
Yes. That's like, that's not our concern. And again, there's a lot of that. We asked for if they could send us their use of force policy. And what we received was basically something that sounded like a 1950s Boy Scout honor code. So, nothing against, nothing against Boy Scouts, but yeah, it was just not where we need to be. So I think that they do have, I think in practice, and in their training, they have some of these things in place, but if it's not in writing, then it's hard to enforce. So again, that's something that we would want this oversight board to be reviewing and looking into. I mean, somebody really needs to be. And if we ultimately aren't successful at getting an oversight board, those are still things that we would follow up on. And there is legislation like a ban on chokeholds and other things being passed at the state level too.
I think I was surprised at a lot of the stuff they learned was at the academy, that there wasn't ongoing stuff. It was, you didn't come with kind of readdressing these things and talking about them and giving them space. It was mostly what they got at the academy that was.
Yes. And I mean, and the need for ongoing and updated training, cultural and racial bias training, I think it's important, but I also think that that's not something that I think we need to be careful to not let that just be a box that is checked, because they're very eager to say, oh, we're going to do these trainings, and that's great, but that's not really enough, because studies are showing that just having those bias trainings is not enough. So we need to be careful about, what we're all being sold, because Williamsburg is talking a good talk about we want to be a very progressive police department, and we're following, all the best practices and all of that. And it's like, I do believe some of that. I think it's well intentioned, but if there's nothing to hold them accountable for it, then it's sort of hard to know.
Hey, pups. Come on.
Were there any more questions, Jody?
Not in the chat.
Okay. Does anyone else, did we miss any hands or any more? I mean, Jessica, you did such an amazing job at giving us so much information to think about, that I'm glad that we recorded this, because we can, when you're leading, share it with other people, because I think it really is important for people to understand, because I think a lot of this is, everybody hears, defund the police and all of these kind of things, and it seems like an anti-police kind of position, but I don't think it is. It's really a human position that we need to take, and I think it's one that is important, and I really appreciate all that you do in this, along with having 4 children, by the way, and homeschooling and doing all that stuff that you're doing too. I really do appreciate, and I appreciate working with you. I work on the committee, and but I don't do near what Jessica does. So thank you, Jessica. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Thank you for being here and for providing this forum. I mean, so many of you are really wonderful advocates on so many issues. And I know, I tell myself all the time, as much as I would love everyone to be involved in criminal legal system reform, we've all got to find, that thing that we're passionate about. There's enough issues to go around for sure, but I would love to help, anybody that's interested in this work. I got it started because I read the book Just Mercy. And I just felt like, how can I turn away, from this issue? And this is just, we've a lot of you have read The New Jim Crow. This is just one more way to keep African Americans down. And I felt like this was the fight I needed to fight. So I welcome anybody to join me. I'm happy to teach you what I know and point you places because there's so much I don't know. but thanks so much.
Keep learning, keep listening, keep engaging. We have some other things that are coming up. Take a look at our website. If there's anything that you'd like to see us do or people you'd like us to kind of bring on. And of course, Jessica, we hope you'll come back and share some information, as we move forward, because, COVID is still in the forefront of everything, but there will be some opening up, and hopefully there's some people here in this room that's going to get involved in that. And that's another great thing, is you've just told more people about it. So I really appreciate all of you coming tonight, because I know there's certainly a lot of things going on, a lot of Zoom conversations that we're all having, but we really do appreciate, altogether really appreciate your being here and being a part of these discussions, because this is how we're going to move things forward and change. So everybody doing their own part. So if there's nothing else that anyone would like to add, we're grateful Trish came. Trish is Jessica's mom. She visited us from Pennsylvania, so that's great. And thanks for coming, Trish. And it was nice to meet you. And for that,
I just wanted to say, I also have two friends here who are African American activists and advocates, and I'm pleased they were able to join us tonight too. So thank you all.
Thank you for sharing that as well. Again, everyone, thank you again for your support, and we're so glad that you came. And Jessica, we'll be in touch.
All right, thanks
And,
everybody.
Everyone have a wonderful Thanksgiving and a peaceful as we go on through the remainder of this year. So take care. Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody. I look forward to getting your emails.
Thank you so much, Jessica. I'm a friend of your mother's, the African American she was talking about, and I loved hearing you speak tonight.
Oh, thank you.
Very enlightening.
Thanks so much.
You take care.
And you
and
can
have
come to
wonderful
our other
holidays.
meetings. Zoom is just a phone call away, so you can keep joining us. So we'd love to have you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Jody, for your mastery at the IT.
Yes, thanks, Jody.
Mm-hmm. Everybody have a blessed Thanksgiving. Thank you.
Good night. Thank you.